Hello, everybody, and welcome to the From Poverty to Progress channel, the channel that is devoted to promoting an awareness and understanding of human progress. My name is Michael Magoon. I am the author of the From Poverty to Progress book series. The first book in this series is called From Poverty to Progress, where I explain the origins and causes of modern human progress. The second book, Promoting Progress, will be available in the spring of 2023, where I build on those ideas to argue for a new policy agenda for keeping progress going. Stay tuned to the end of this video for a free book giveaway. Today I'm going to continue our series on book reviews on the topics of progress, history, economic growth, and technological innovation. First of all, I want to apologize for the quality of my voice. I am recovering from a cold, but the show must go on. Today's book review is going to be Not by Genes Alone, How Culture Transformed Human Evolution by Peter Richerson, who is a professor of biology and environmental science at the University of California, Davis, and Robert Boyd, who is a professor of anthropology at Arizona State University. Now, first of all, you might notice right away that these two writers are from very different areas. One focuses on biology, the other focuses on anthropology. And I think that's one of the reasons why this book is so exciting, because it really changes how we view both of those specialties. The book is about the topic of cultural evolution, which is why human societies change over time. Cultural evolution goes way back, all the way to the Enlightenment and to the 19th century, but in its modern form, it tends to combine the theories of biological evolution from Charles Darwin with cultural anthropology. In particular, it focuses on the interaction between biology and culture. Essentially, what they argue is that there are two different kinds of evolution that have impacted human society. One is the more traditional evolution, which is biological evolution, starting, of course, from Charles Darwin. This is focusing on changes to plants and animals caused by the interaction between biology and the constraints within the natural environment. But then there's another type of evolution that is much more recent, which is called cultural evolution, and that is exclusively among human beings. It focuses on changes to human society caused by the interaction among biology, culture, constraints within the natural environment, and competition between human societies. Typically, the concept of cultural evolution applies to pre-industrial societies, particularly hunter-gatherer societies, herding societies, agricultural societies, and in general, societies in the past. It's not typically applied to modern societies, but I think it can be done. So what does all this have to do with progress? Well, in my first book, From Poverty to Progress, I make the argument that there is a third type of evolution, which is progress. Cultural evolution is a key concept for understanding how human societies changed before progress was invented. Cultural evolution is about change to human societies that do not actually create increased material standard of living for the masses. Cultural evolution had the unintended consequence of leading to progress once the 5 keys to progress were invented. Now, I have a lot of videos about these topics elsewhere. I'm not going to go into detail. If you are interested in this topic, I would recommend the videos that are listed at the bottom of this screen. So let's get on to some of the author's quotes. Now, first I want to say this is a fairly academic book. It is not necessarily easy reading, so some of these quotes might seem a tad wordy, if you will, but I believe that the key points that these authors make are essential to understanding human societies over time. So let's start out. Culture is crucial for understanding human behavior. People acquire beliefs and values from the people around them, and you can't explain human behavior without taking this reality into account. Culture is part of biology. Right away, a lot of you are going, what? Culture, biology, aren't those two separate things? Well, no, they make the argument that they're not. The most fundamental questions of how humans came to be the kind of animals we are can only be answered by a theory in which culture has its proper role and in which it intimately intertwined with other aspects of human biology. In this book, we outline such a theory. The heart of this book is an account of how the population level consequences of imitation and teaching work. We are advocating that social scientists change the way they do business, supplementing their usual toolkit with ideas imported from biology. Now, there's nothing that makes an academic more upset than having someone from another field come in and tell them that they're going about things all wrong and they need to start using a whole different conceptual toolkit. But that's exactly what Richerson and Boyd do, and I think they're right. One of the best ways to learn new things is by importing ideas from one discipline into another discipline. Culture is mostly information stored in human brains and gets transmitted from brain to brain by way of a variety of social learning processes. While researchers debate culture in non-human animals, one thing is fairly clear. Only humans show much evidence of cumulative cultural evolution. By cumulative cultural evolution, we mean behaviors or artifacts that are transmitted and modified over many generations. Our concern is that lumping culture with other environmental influences leads people to ignore the novel evolutionary processes that are created by culture. Odd as it may seem, in many kinds of variable environments, the best strategy is to rely mostly on imitation, or as I call it, copying, not by your own individual learning. So, what do I think are some of the key takeaways from this book? Well, first of all, you've probably all heard about the nature versus nurture debate, which was really popular during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and to a certain extent still is. Essentially, it's asking a question of what are the main causes of human behavior? Is it biology or is it parenting and the environment? Richerson and Boyd state that this entire debate is based on an incorrect assumption. The assumption is that it's biology versus the environment, and the term nurture kind of implies that the most important thing of the environment is parenting. Culture is incorrectly assumed to be part of the environment. Environment is incorrectly assumed to be largely about parenting. But Richerson and Boyd make the case that culture is part of human biology. Culture is neither nature nor nurture, but some of both. So instead of two separate things, biology versus the environment, they say there's actually three things: biology, culture, and the environment. And culture is partly about the environment and partly about biology. Natural selection, acting on culture, is the ultimate cause of human behavior. Now, this is their statement. I'm not sure I'd fully agree with this, but I do believe that natural selection does play a very important role in how human societies change over time. Getting back to authors' quotes, most readers, we are sure, come to this book with the intuition that individual humans are pretty smart, and that this is mainly what is responsible for most of the spectacular accomplishments of our societies. However, there is much evidence that suggests that this view is wrong. Psychological studies of human decision making indicate that human rationality is narrowly bounded. Considerable evidence suggests that the ability to acquire novel behaviors by observation is essential for cumulative cultural change. Students of animal social learning distinguish observational learning, in other words, watching somebody else, or true imitation, hereafter plain imitation, from other kinds of social transmission. Imitation occurs when animals learn a novel behavior by observing the behavior of more experienced animals. Simpler kinds of social transmission are much more common. To the extent that observers can rapidly and accurately use the behavior of models as a starting point, imitation leads to cumulative evolution of behaviors that no single individual could invent on its own. By becoming a selective learner, an individual gains most of the advantages of both learning and imitation. Imitation allows cumulative improvement. So what does all this mean? Well, let me boil it down to what I think are some of the key takeaways of this book. Culture enables human beings to learn from other humans quickly by copying them rather than spending the time to investigate their nature. Most animals essentially learn via genetics. That genetics is effectively passing down the information about what strategies work the best for survival and reproduction within the current natural environment. Human beings still have that, but they've added on something else, which is cultural evolution, which is largely based on copying other people. This enables humans to adapt to a changing environment far faster than genetic evolution in animals. Now, I go into much more detail in my book, From Poverty to Progress, about this point. Copying is essential to cultural evolution and, by the way, to progress. We often think of copying as a bad thing. That's cheating, right? No, it's not. Copying is effectively the best way to learn about things, and it enables everyone to take advantage of key innovations made by other people, and it can rapidly spread this through society. Copying accelerates the diffusion of what works. So copying is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Getting back to the author's quotes, people often imitate the successful. Determining who is a success is much easier than determining how to be a success. By imitating the successful, you have a chance of acquiring the behaviors that cause success, even if you do not know anything about which characteristics of the successful are responsible for their success. If you can accurately imitate everything they do, you ought to be a success too, at least insofar as success is based on culturally transmittable characters. Now, what does all that mean? Well, I would say that in pretty much every domain in life, whether you want to be a doctor or a basketball player or a plumber or a lawyer or a construction worker, there is a simple golden rule to success, and that is copy the successful. Now, I know that sounds easy, and it's actually not easy because it's not clear exactly what it is you need to copy about the successful. But if you start out with this golden rule, you're well on your way towards success. But there's no guarantees. People are endowed with two sets of innate predispositions, or social instincts. The first is a set of ancient instincts that we share with our primate ancestors. I think it's fair to say that you would call that genetics. The second is a set of tribal instincts that allow us to interact cooperatively with a larger, symbolically marked set of people, or tribe. This tribal social instincts results from the gene-cultural coevolution of tribal scale society. That's a big mouthful. I'll explain it a little bit more later. There is a great deal of behavioral variation among human groups. Such variation is the reason why we have culture, to allow different groups to accumulate different adaptations to a wide range of environments. Human societies are crude superorganisms. One of the human species' main social adaptations is the ability to organize cooperation, coordination, and a division of labor on a much larger scale than the typical primate kin group. So what are the key takeaways from this? Well, first of all, human beings are social animals, and we copy the people that are around us. Humans living in a group tend to become more similar as they copy each other. Because other groups are copying different norms, groups tend to evolve different cultures. Over time, this leads to cultural variations across the globe. Now, one might think that the human disposition to copy leads to everybody to be the same, but in fact, it's the opposite. Because we copy people who are near us, we become more like the people who are near us, and we become more different from people who are further away. This helps to explain why there is so much cultural diversity across the globe. And here is another point, which I don't really have a quote for as much, but that culture and genes co-evolve, i.e., a change in one puts pressure on the other to adapt. Let me give one example, and there are actually lots of examples in the literature of where genes and culture interact and co-evolve together. For example, in the enzymes to digest cow's milk. Now, most people in Western societies take for granted the fact that we can digest cow's milk. But in fact, there are many societies across the world that cannot do so simply because they do not have the enzymes to digest cow's milk. They can digest their mother's milk, but they cannot digest cow's milk. So how is it the case? How is it that some people across the world have the ability to digest cow's milk and others don't? Well, clearly it's biological. There are certain genes
that enable the production of lactase, which digests lactose, which is the main ingredient of cow's milk. We know for certain that that does not go back very far. In fact, the areas where people have those specific genes are in the areas that have descendants from the first dairy farmers. So it's not too hard to construct a plausible hypothesis as to why. About 7 to 10,000 years ago, somebody came up with the great idea of being able to drink cow's milk. And so therefore you can get a reliable form of protein and energy without having to actually kill the cow. The vast majority of the people tried it and they couldn't digest it. It gave them stomach problems, but yet it helped them to survive. One lucky person happened to have a genetic mutation that enabled them to produce a little bit of lactase, which made it easier for them to digest the lactose in the cow's milk. Because that gave a tremendous advantage to that one person, they were able to have far more children than other people. And then gradually, because it was such an advantage to be able to drink cow's milk, those genes spread throughout that social group. So what you have is in Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Africa, it is very common now to be able to drink cow's milk, and that is biological. But in other areas of the world, you can't do that. So here you have the interaction between genes and culture. And this is just one example. I could come up with dozens of other more examples. People tend to assume that human beings are genetically identical to how we were 100,000 years ago, and that's simply not true. Genetic change has actually accelerated over the last 100 years, particularly over the last 10,000 years since the invention of agriculture. The theory of cultural evolution helps to explain how that happened and why it matters. So, what's my overall rating of this book? In terms of scope, I'd give it 5 stars. It covers a very wide range of societies. In terms of theory, it's also a 5. This is really one of the key books of cultural evolution and understanding the relationship between biology and culture. And I think if you want to understand human societies overall, you need to read this book. Readability, well, I'd give it a 3. Sometimes it's even worse than that. It's a pretty tough read. I think for most of you, it's probably best to look at the summary, which I have at techratchet.com. But for those of you who are really interested in the topic, I would highly recommend this book. My personal rating, it's a 5. This is a foundational book for understanding how human societies change. My only real complaint is that it doesn't really focus as much on modern societies, which I do in my own book. Well, I hope you like this video. Please subscribe and like. It really helps this channel grow. Also, I'd appreciate any comments so that I know what it is you like and what it is you dislike about this episode and other episodes on the channel. If you'd like more resources on the topic of progress, I'd recommend going to my website, frompovertytoprogress.com. With a free email subscription, you get free ebook samples, free audio samples, and discounted prices on ebooks and audiobooks. If you insist on paying full price, you can buy my books in the ebook, paperback, and hardcover format at Amazon and Ingram Spark if you're a bookstore or a library. Audiobooks are available at Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. If you're interested in book summaries on the concepts of technology, history, economic growth, and progress, I would recommend going to my other website, which is techratchet.com. I've got over 280 book summaries there, and many of them I will be covering in future episodes in this channel. So please tell me which one you're most interested in covering. So now we've gotten to the exciting part. It's a free book giveaway. I'm giving away a digital copy of my first book, From Poverty to Progress. Most of you already know the rules. If you don't know the rules, please pause this video and read the instructions. I hope you enjoy this video and that you explore more episodes on this channel. See you next time.